Today I thought it would be great to talk to you a little bit about how you can retire as a millionaire and how it may be a little bit easier than what you actually thought. As we looked back over the past year, and as we even looked back further over the course of the past 10 years, we knew that housing prices have gone up substantially in London. I mean, just over the past 3 years alone, they've gone up by 45%, which has given people a huge equity bump in their houses. Equity is basically the market value of your home minus what you owe the bank. So if you were to sell your property and you collected all the money from the sale of the home and you paid out the mortgage, then that lump of money that you're left with at the end of it is the equity in your house. So let's use an example to illustrate this idea of equity growth. So let's say at the beginning of 2017, you bought a house for $350,000. You put the minimum down payment down, which is 5%, which would be about $17,500, giving you a mortgage of $332,500. Now you work really hard over the course of those 3 years that you've owned it, and here we are, and you've managed to pay your mortgage down to $296,000 roughly. So you have approximately $53,000 in equity. Right? Sort of. You're almost there. What we didn't take into consideration is market appreciation. So we go back and we crunch some numbers and we look at the fact that your home's gone up by 45% in value. So it's no longer worth $350,000. It's actually worth $507,500. So we thought we had $53,000 in equity, but as it turns out, we actually have $210,000 and some change in equity in our property. Isn't that incredible? I mean, you think about it, all you did was own a house. You just bought a house. If you sold the house and you paid off the rest of the mortgage, you'd have $210,000. You might think, what good does it do me if I don't want to sell my house? Well, in Canada, what they actually allow you to do is they allow you to borrow against the equity in your home. You're only allowed to borrow up to 80% of the value of your home. So your home's now worth $507,000 and you can borrow 80% of that, meaning you can borrow up to $406,000 of that. But we still have a mortgage owing of $296,000, so they will allow us to borrow $406,000 minus the $296,000, which gives us borrowable equity of $109,000 and some change. So you can go to the bank or your lender and say, listen, I want to borrow against the equity. They'll crunch those numbers and they'll say, here you go. Here's $109,000 to go and invest as you would like. So maybe it's worth noting what you probably shouldn't do with the $109,000. You probably shouldn't go on a hot tropical vacation. You probably shouldn't buy the Benz that you've always wanted. I feel like I shouldn't have to say that. I'm sure that there's some people that need that warning. So let me talk to you about what you should do with it. Option number one is probably the simplest, and that is to just leave it where it is. Don't take the equity, just leave it there. And while there's an opportunity cost to that, meaning you're not taking that money and investing it in anything to make you more money, there is a peace of mind benefit. There's certainly something to be said for just paying down your mortgage and having that done as soon as you can. You just have to know that you're missing out on making money, and that's okay as long as you're okay with that. So option two, and really the last option, is to reinvest it in appreciating asset. So the difference between investing it in, that pimpin' Mercedes-Benz or investing it in an appreciating asset is that as soon as you drive that Benz away, it depreciates. 10 chances to 1, it's never gonna be worth more than what you bought it for. So let's talk about a few different options on investing in appreciating assets and what that can look like. So about 3 years ago, we had built up enough equity in our primary residence and we chose to go and buy an investment property. And then that appreciated in value, and we took the money out of that and we went and bought another investment property. And we'll probably do the same this year. And the idea is that these assets are growing in appreciation. We can borrow against them and buy more properties, more appreciating assets. But some of you may say to me, but Cory, I don't want to be a landlord. I don't want to have to deal with tenants. Some people don't want to be property managers and deal with the possible headaches that come along with that. So there are other options. Some people, and the way they grow their net worth is by investing in the stock market. And self-admittedly, this is not something that I would consider myself an expert on by any means, but historically the S&P stock market has basically grown by about 7% per year, accounting for inflation. So what you can do is you can buy into an index fund. If on average it's growing 7% per year, then on average this index fund is going to grow 7% per year. So let's circle back to that $109,000 that we have to invest. If we were to take that $109,000, put it into an index fund, and let's say it grew by 7% per year, after about 5 years, we'd have $153,000. That's an appreciation of about $44,000. While that may not seem like a lot in 5 years, there is an argument to be made that it could just be, let's set it and kind of forget it. So if I put it in there and I let it sit for 25 years and I just let it appreciate, I retire, I decide that I'm going to pull it out, that stock is now worth $593,000. So that's been an increase of $484,000. Thank you, compound interest. And that's a perfect example of how you can take a little chunk of money that you already have, invest it into an appreciating asset, basically hit your retirement age and be able to withdraw that money to live off of. That's a pretty big jump to go from just owning a home, pulling a bit of the equity out of that property and investing it. So let's take a different approach. Let's say you are somebody that's willing to go out and become a landlord, buy an investment property. So in Canada, if you're going to buy an investment property, one of the stipulations is that you need to have a 20% down payment. With $109,000 for down payment, that basically allows us to buy a $500,000 investment property. We get in touch with our favorite realtor and we find great investment property for $500,000. On average, house prices have gone up. I would say a safe number to use is 4%, definitely less than the stock market. So after 5 years, that house is now worth $608,000 and an increase of over $100,000. Let's use that 25-year timeline like we did before. After 25 years, that property is now worth $1,132,000. That's an increase of $832,000. All you did was go out, buy a property, and watch it appreciate. Don't get me wrong, there's stuff that you also had to do being a landlord, but that property is now worth $1.3 million. For those of you that are into the numbers, let me crunch down some of these numbers to maybe give you a more accurate picture of what this house is worth after some of the expenses associated with owning an investment property. So obviously it's gonna cost you money to borrow that $109,000 in equity that you have. The bank is gonna charge you for that. And then when you go and buy that investment property, you're putting a mortgage on the property. So you need to pay for that as well. So we look at this investment property, the cost to borrow, to put a mortgage on it, is about $161,000. And then to borrow that initial $109,000 is about $44,000. And those interest rates could fluctuate, but at today's rates, stretched out over the course of 25 years, cumulatively about $205,000 is going to be our cost of borrowing on that property. Going back to the stock market, our gain was $440,000. And on the investment property, it's about $627,000 that we've had in appreciation. I know that's oversimplified, but I think that it proves the point that I'm trying to make. Simply, you take some equity out of your property and invest it in an appreciating asset, and you are generally much further ahead down the road financially. The thing about real estate is historically tends to be way more stable than the stock market. And while the returns aren't as high, the stability is there, and people would rather have a lower return that's a sure thing than the possibility of a huge return where the possibility of a super low return or hitting zero is also a real possibility, which generally is never the case in real estate. The other thing that I love about real estate that really is different from any other form of investing is that you can really leverage yourself, meaning you can take a small amount of money to get a relatively large asset. All that was required is 20% down payment. So we were able to take that $109,000 and get a $500,000 asset. And the appreciation doesn't happen on the $109,000, it happens on the $500,000. Even though our returns are smaller, I still think the financial impact for us is actually larger. So the last point that I want to make about real estate investing, it's not like you're just buying the property, letting it appreciate, and you're leaving it empty. You're actually putting tenants into that property, and they are technically paying your mortgage for you. I always make sure that when I'm going to rent it, the income that I'm generating from that rent is going to cover all of my expenses plus some. So that's a huge thing. You actually begin to see that my growth on this property is actually bigger than I thought it was. And at the end of that 25, 30, 40 years, however long you want to keep that asset, you sell it. It's not like your tenant gets any of the appreciation from that asset. You get all of it, even though they are the ones that technically paid off that mortgage for you. And over time, the value of your property goes up, rents increase, your rental goes up, and your mortgage payments go down. You get to keep even more and more of that money. So that's why I think there is some differentiation to be made there when we talk about real estate investing. All that to say, if you are a homeowner and you've owned it for any period of time and have not already borrowed against your property, it can be such a huge benefit to you to consider reinvesting some of that equity. But for all those people that are still in their 20s and 30s that have so much time ahead of them before they'll ever need to access that money for retirement, this simple illustration can have such a huge, huge impact on your financial future. And it has been the biggest thing in my life that has allowed me to invest for our family's future that I know will set me up to be financially secure when I decide to quit working. I would encourage you to go through the mental exercise of figuring out what your home is worth, and if you don't know, talk to your realtor and figure out what you might be able to do with some of that equity. I hope that this video has sparked a little bit of inspiration for you to look at your financial future. I have sat with enough people that are not financially in a great spot for their future, and they're looking at what they need to do to make sure that they do end up in a good spot. And unfortunately, sometimes they've left it just a bit too long. So don't wait, act now. And if you have any questions, I would love to chat with you over a quick cup of coffee or even over a phone call to discuss this a little bit further. So that's it for me, guys. I hope you have a fantastic day, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk soon.